I need you to stay with me for this, because what I'm about to tell you feels dangerously close to a mistake I can't undo. I introduced you to my family, and they hated you. Not politely uncomfortable, not cautious, not uncertain. They hated you in a way that felt final. I can still see the moment. The silence at the table. The way my mother folded her hands too tightly. The way my father wouldn't look at you when you spoke. The way my sister smiled without warmth. You were kind. You were composed. You were exactly who you've always been with me. And yet, something shifted in that room. I've built rockets. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals. I've survived public failure and private doubt. But nothing prepared me for watching the woman I love sit across from the people who raised me and feel alone. You felt it, didn't you? That subtle withdrawal. That invisible wall. Tell me honestly, when you looked at me across that table, did you see hesitation in my eyes? Or did you see fear? Because I was afraid. Not of you. Of losing something permanent. I kept telling myself it would pass. That first impressions can be wrong. That strong women are often misunderstood. But when we left that night and my phone started lighting up with messages from them, I felt a pressure I haven't felt in years. They said you were too independent. Too opinionated. Too different. Too unpredictable. And what they meant was you are not like them. You are not quiet. You are not easily molded. You are not impressed by status. You challenge me. You question me. You make me softer and stronger at the same time. Do you know how rare that is? But here's the part that's eating at me. When my mother pulled me aside and said, "She will pull you away from us," something inside me hesitated. Why did I hesitate? That question has been haunting me ever since. Because if I was completely certain, there would have been no hesitation at all. And I need to ask you something difficult? If loving you means disappointing them, will you still want me when that weight shows up in my voice? When the tension slips into our quiet moments? When holidays feel divided, can you love a man whose loyalty is being tested from every direction? I thought I knew the cost of choosing you. I'm not sure I calculated all of it. But listen to me carefully, because this matters. What I feel for you is not impulsive. It's not rebellion. It's not infatuation. It is something I recognize slowly, carefully, like discovering a new law of physics that explains everything I didn't understand before. You feel like inevitability. And yet I'm standing at a crossroads I didn't expect to face this soon. If you're still here with me, still listening, maybe subscribe quietly so you don't miss what happens between us. And tell me where you're watching from. I want to picture you there while I try to make sense of this. Because this is not just about whether they approve. It's about whether I am strong enough to stand between you and their judgment without flinching. When we drove home that night, you were quiet. Too quiet. And when I asked if you were okay, you said, "I'm fine." You weren't fine, and I wasn't either. I haven't told you the real reason yet. There's something they said after you left, something that shook me more than I want to admit. And if I'm honest, a small, dangerous part of me wondered whether choosing you might fracture everything I've ever known. What if loving you cost me my family? What if not loving you cost me myself? When we got home that night, I stood in the dark for a long time before coming inside. The house was quiet, but my mind was not. Their words were echoing, repeating, reshaping themselves into sharper versions. My mother said you were calculating. My father said you would divide me. My sister said you were too intense for a man like me. And the worst part was not what they said. It was how easily doubt tried to attach itself to their voices. I hate admitting that to you, but if I am going to be honest, I have to let you see the parts of me that are not heroic. Did you feel the shift in me when I drove you home? Did you sense the way I was already carrying their opinions like a weight in my chest? I kept replaying the dinner in my mind. The way you tried to connect with them. The way you asked thoughtful questions. The way you laughed, not too loud, not too soft. You were not inappropriate. You were not dismissive. You were simply yourself. And maybe that is what unsettled them. You do not shrink. You do not perform. You do not bend to make others comfortable. You have lived enough life to know who you are. For a woman who has loved, lost, survived, and grown, that confidence is earned. But in that room, your strength was interpreted as threat. Tell me something difficult. Have you spent your life being misunderstood by families who wanted you smaller? After you left, they did not soften. They intensified. My mother said, "She will take you away from your roots." My father said, "You are blinded." My sister said, "She is not the right energy for our family." And then my brother, quietly, almost kindly, asked me if I was sure I wasn't confusing admiration with love. That question lodged itself into me. Am I admiring your resilience, or am I loving you? Am I drawn to your independence because it challenges me, or because I want to possess something strong? These are not questions I enjoy asking myself, but they matter. Because if I choose you, I must choose you with clarity, not rebellion. I need you to understand something that I have not said out loud yet. Part of my hesitation is not about you. It is about me. I have spent my entire life building systems that function under pressure. Companies, teams, missions, I know how to control outcomes. But love with you feels uncontrollable. It feels mature, steady, and yet dangerously deep. You do not chase me. You do not flatter me. You do not compete with my ambitions. You simply stand beside me. And that kind of partnership is powerful. Maybe that is what frightens them. Or maybe it is what frightens me. Because if I let myself fully commit, there is no partial retreat. There is no safe exit. I have not told you the real reason yet. When my mother looked at me before I left her house, she said something quieter than the others. She said, "She will make you choose." And the terrifying part is that she is right. You will not demand it loudly. You will not create drama. But your presence requires alignment. You will not stay where you are half-claimed. You will not love a man who keeps one foot in his childhood and one foot in his future. And I respect that. But I am still asking myself whether I am ready to make that choice without resentment creeping in later. If I choose you, I must never blame you for what I lose. Here is the truth that unsettles me even more. When I imagined a life without you, just to test my own heart, I felt an immediate emptiness. Not panic, not desperation. Emptiness. The kind that settles slowly and stays. I pictured family holidays that were easier, quieter, less tense. But I also pictured waking up without your steady presence beside me, without your questions, without your calm, without the way you look at me when I am tired and pretend I am not. And in that imagined future, I was successful. I was respected. I was surrounded by approval. But I was alone in a way that success cannot fix. So let me ask you something that may make you uncomfortable. If my family continues to resist you, if gatherings become strained, if invitations feel conditional, will you stand firm without asking me to cut them off completely? Can you love a man who is still navigating loyalty? Or will you eventually decide that my hesitation means I am not strong enough for you because I see your strength? I see the way you hold your dignity. And I know you will not beg for acceptance. You would rather walk away than feel unwanted. The tension is heavier tonight than it was yesterday. It is no longer about whether they like you. It is about whether I am willing to endure their disappointment to protect what we are building. And I am closer to a decision than you realize. But there is something else you do not know yet. Something that happened after that dinner that changes the direction of this entirely. And when you hear it, you may question whether I almost made a choice that would have cost us everything. After you left that night, my father asked me to stay behind. Not in anger. Not loudly. Just that quiet tone he uses when something serious is coming. I knew before he spoke that whatever followed would not be casual. He closed the door, sat across from me, and said, "You have built empires by thinking long-term. Why are you thinking short-term with her?" That question unsettled me more than any criticism, because it assumed that loving you was impulsive, temporary, emotional. And I have never been careless with decisions that define my life. So why did his doubt land inside me like it belonged there? He told me he had done his own research. He said you were too self-sufficient, too accomplished in your own right, too unwilling to orbit someone else's world. He said a partnership like that would become a battlefield of pride. I tried to defend you, but as I spoke, I felt something uncomfortable rising in me. Not disagreement. Recognition. You are strong. You are not submissive. You will not fade into the background of my ambitions. And a quiet voice inside me whispered, "Is he right?" Would two strong forces eventually collide? That was the moment something dangerous happened. I imagined a different kind of woman. Softer. Easier. More agreeable. Someone my family would instantly approve of. Someone who would never challenge me in private or public. Someone who would make dinners peaceful and holidays uncomplicated. And for a brief, shameful second, I wondered if life might be simpler with someone like that. I am not proud of that thought. But I will not lie to you. It existed. Then I imagined waking up next to that imaginary woman. I imagined conversations without depth. I imagined being admired but not understood. I imagined never being questioned when I needed to be challenged. And suddenly that simpler future felt hollow. Peaceful on the surface, empty underneath. I realized something that shook me. What my family calls intensity, I call compatibility. What they call threat, I call balance. You do not compete with me. You refine me. But the tension did not disappear. It grew. Because the more I defended you, the more they pressed. My sister said, "You are blinded by how she makes you feel." And I had to ask myself a brutal question. Am I in love with you, or am I in love with how you see me? You look at me as if I am not just successful, not just driven but human. You see the exhaustion I hide, you see the doubts I never say out loud. That kind of recognition is intoxicating. But is it sustainable? Or will it fade once reality sets in? I need you to answer something honestly, even if it stings. If my family never fully embraces you, will you slowly grow resentful? Will you look at me years from now and see the man who hesitated? Because hesitation leaves scars. And I felt myself hesitating that night, not because I doubted you, because I feared losing them. And fear is a powerful negotiator. It convinces you that safety is more important than fulfillment. There is something else I have not told you yet. After everyone left, my mother called me again. Her voice was softer. She said, "I am afraid she will change you." I almost laughed. "You have already changed me. I am more patient with you, more transparent, more aware of my own emotional patterns. If that is change, then it is growth." But when she said it, a question surfaced in me. If loving you transforms me, am I ready to become someone my family does not fully recognize? The pressure is no longer subtle. It is building. And I am beginning to realize that the real conflict is not between you and them. It is between the version of me that seeks approval and the version of me that seeks alignment. One will be disappointed. The other might finally be at peace. But I have not made the choice yet. And what happened yesterday forced me even closer to the edge of making the wrong one. Yesterday, I almost did something that would have changed everything between us, and you would not have seen it coming. I almost called you to create distance. Not a breakup, not something dramatic. Just enough space to calm the storm at home. I told myself it would be temporary, strategic, sensible. I even rehearsed the words in my head. I would say we both need time. I would say pressure is clouding clarity. I would say I want to protect us from conflict. It sounded reasonable, mature, controlled. But underneath that calm language was fear. Pure fear. The truth is, their disapproval is louder than I expected. Every conversation with them carries the same undertone. Doubt, concern, prediction. They speak as if they already see the ending. And when people who raised you speak with certainty, it has weight. I started questioning things I had never questioned before. The way you challenge me. The way you refuse to accept vague answers. The way you expect emotional presence, not just physical presence. Those things once felt refreshing. Suddenly they felt demanding. And I hated myself for that shift. So I sat with my phone in my hand, ready to call you and create that distance. And in that moment, I asked myself a brutal question. Am I stepping back because something is wrong with us, or because something is uncomfortable for them? Discomfort is not danger. I know that logically. But emotionally, it can feel the same. I realized that if I called you with that speech, I would not be protecting us. I would be protecting myself from confrontation. And that is not leadership. That is avoidance. There is something I have not admitted yet. A part of me fears that you will eventually ask me to choose. Not loudly, not with ultimatums, but quietly. With your dignity, you will not compete for space in my life. If you ever feel secondary, you will withdraw. And that possibility terrifies me more than my family's anger. Because losing them would fracture history. Losing you would fracture my future. I need to know something from you. When you said you were fine after that dinner, were you already preparing yourself for rejection? Were you bracing for me to retreat? You have lived enough life to recognize when a man is conflicted. Did you see it in me? And if you did, why did you stay calm instead of pulling away first? Sometimes your composure feels stronger than my certainty. Last night I could not sleep. I kept replaying the way you touched my hand under the table when the silence became heavy. It was subtle, steady, reassuring. You were comforting me in a room that was judging you. That realization did something to me. It exposed my weakness. I should have been shielding you. Instead, you were grounding me. And that imbalance unsettled me more than their criticism. I am standing closer to a decision than ever before. The safe path is obvious. Ease the relationship. Create space. Let time dilute intensity. My family would relax. Tension would fade. Life would return to predictable patterns. But I keep asking myself, will I respect myself if I choose safety over truth? Because when I am with you, there is no confusion about how I feel. The confusion only appears when other voices enter the room. Something happened this morning that pushed everything further. A conversation that forced me to confront whether I am strong enough to defend you publicly, not just love you privately. And if I am not strong enough, Then maybe my family is right about something I do not want to see. This morning my mother came to my office unannounced. She has never done that before. She sat across from me, looked around at everything I have built, and then looked directly at me with a kind of sadness that felt strategic. She did not attack you. She did not criticize you. She spoke softly, almost tenderly, which made it harder to resist. She said, "I am not trying to control you. I am trying to protect you." And when a mother says that, it bypasses logic and goes straight to instinct. She told me she sees patterns in life that I cannot yet see. She said strong women sometimes admire powerful men at first, then resent them later. She said independence can turn into rivalry. She said love that feels intense in the beginning can quietly turn competitive. And as she spoke, I felt something unsettling. Not agreement, but vulnerability. Because what if she is describing a risk I am too emotionally invested to recognize? What if love has blinded me to dynamics that will only reveal themselves years from now? Then she asked me a question I did not expect. She said, "Does she need you, or does she just want you?" That question cut deeper than anything else. You do not need me financially. You do not need my name. You do not need my protection. You stand on your own. And for some reason, that unsettles them. They cannot understand why I would choose a woman who is not dependent. But it also unsettled me in a way I have not admitted. If you do not need me, what keeps you here? What anchors you to us? I have not told you the real reason yet. There is something beneath all of this that I have been avoiding. When my mother left, she paused at the door and said, "If you choose her, you are choosing a different future than the one we imagined for you." That sentence has been echoing in my head all day. A different future. Not wrong. Not evil. Just different. And I realize that loving you is not just about romance. It is about redefining my identity in ways that will never fully be accepted by the people who shaped me. Here is the hidden truth I have been circling around. A part of me is afraid that you will outgrow me emotionally. You have done the internal work. You communicate directly. You process pain instead of burying it. And sometimes I worry that I am still learning lessons you mastered years ago. What if my family senses that imbalance and interprets it as weakness? What if I am afraid not of losing them, but of not being enough for you in the long run? When I imagined stepping back from you, it was not because I doubted your character. It was because I doubted my capacity to handle the transformation loving you requires. You do not allow emotional laziness. You ask for presence. You ask for clarity. You ask for accountability. And those things demand growth. Growth is beautiful, but it is also destabilizing. It means leaving behind old comforts, old roles, old versions of myself. Let me ask you something that may unsettle you. If I chose the easier path, if I chose a woman my family adored immediately, would you see that as betrayal or relief? Would you think I saved you from years of tension? Or would you see it as proof that I was never strong enough to protect what we had? I need to know how you would interpret that choice, because interpretation shapes memory, and memory shapes identity. The pressure is no longer theoretical. It is personal. I can feel myself approaching a line where whatever I decide will permanently shift the direction of my life. And there is one more layer to this that I have not revealed. Something that happened after my mother left that makes this far more complicated than simple approval or rejection. And when you hear it, you may question whether I am closer to walking away than I am willing to admit. After my mother left, I did something I have never done before. I called someone from my past, not because I missed her. Not because I wanted to reopen anything, but because I wanted contrast. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to hear a familiar voice that my family once approved of and see if comfort would return. It was a dangerous experiment. She answered warmly, easily. There was no tension in that conversation, no challenge, no depth, just nostalgia and politeness. For a moment it felt simple, predictable, safe. She asked about my work. She admired what I had built. She laughed at the right moments. She did not question anything. She did not probe beneath the surface. And I could feel how effortless it would be to re-enter that version of myself. The version that was admired but not examined. The version that never had to confront emotional complexity. And that ease tempted me more than I want to admit. This is the part that shames me. For a brief second, I imagined introducing her to my family again. I imagined my mother smiling without reservation, my father approving quietly, the table relaxed, the atmosphere light, no tension, no subtle judgment. And I saw how easily my life could slide back into alignment with their expectations. That vision was not repulsive. It was appealing. And that is what scared me. Then something shifted inside me. As I listened to her speak, I realized I was not leaning forward emotionally. I was observing, detached. There was no current beneath the conversation. No electricity. No risk. It was comfortable, but it was flat. And I suddenly understood something critical. Approval without depth is hollow. Harmony without intimacy is performance. And I do not want to perform love, I want to live it. But here is where the conflict intensifies. When I hung up the phone, I felt guilty. Not because I had done anything wrong externally, but because I had allowed myself to imagine an alternative that excluded you. And, if I am capable of imagining that future, what does it say about my certainty? Does true love eliminate all alternatives, or does it simply make one path more meaningful despite the others existing? I need to ask you something uncomfortable. If you knew I made that call, would you see it as betrayal? Or as a man wrestling honestly with the magnitude of his choice? Because I am not drifting toward her. I am confronting my fear of choosing you completely, and those are not the same thing. But intention does not always erase impact. There is something deeper I have still not said. The reason my family's disapproval cuts so sharply is because they rarely agree on anything. Their unity against you feels almost symbolic, as if the universe itself is testing me. And when opposition is unanimous, it forces reflection. Am I defending you because I love you, or because I want to prove I am independent? That question has kept me awake for nights. And yet, when I picture you walking away because I hesitated too long, the pain is immediate, not dramatic, not theatrical. Immediate and real. I see you choosing dignity over uncertainty. I see you deciding you deserve a man who stands without wobbling. And I cannot blame you for that. In fact, I would respect you for it. But I do not know if I would recover from it. The tension is no longer about them versus you. It is about who I become through this decision. Am I a man who folds under pressure, or a man who endures it for something authentic? I am closer to clarity, but clarity is not comfortable. It demands loss, and I am beginning to sense that whichever path I choose, something important will fracture. There is one more truth I have delayed telling you. Something about that phone call that you have not considered. And when I reveal it, you may see how close I came to making the wrong choice entirely. When I ended that call, she said something that has not left me since. She said, "You sound different. Softer, almost uncertain." It was not criticism. It was observation. And in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. The version of me she once knew was decisive, contained, almost emotionally armored. The man you know is more open, more reflective, more willing to sit in discomfort instead of overpowering it. And I suddenly understood why my family feels unsettled. Loving you has changed my posture in the world. They interpret that softness as vulnerability in the wrong way. As weakness. As distraction. But I know the difference. You have not made me smaller. You have made me more aware. The problem is that awareness disrupts systems that were built on certainty. And my family prefers certainty. They prefer the version of me who does not hesitate, who does not question himself in the middle of the night. You invite those questions. You create space for them, and that space is powerful. After that call, I did not feel tempted toward her. I felt exposed. Because the fact that I made it at all means I am still wrestling with fear. I wanted to confirm that safety still existed if I retreated. I wanted proof that approval was accessible, and it is. That door is open. But when I picture walking through it, I feel something close to grief. Not relief, grief. As if I would be abandoning something alive for something predictable. Here is what I have not said clearly enough. When I imagine a future without you, I see stability. When I imagine a future with you, I see growth. Stability is calm. Growth is disruptive. Stability is respected. Growth is questioned. And I am standing between those two visions, knowing I cannot have both without compromise. The weight of that realization is heavier than anything my family has said. I need to know something from you that may hurt to answer. If I hesitate publicly, even while loving you privately, will that be enough for you? Or will you require visible allegiance? Because I am beginning to see that love is not just internal conviction. It is external courage, and courage has consequences. If I defend you openly, I will disappoint them deeply. If I defend them subtly, I will disappoint you silently. One disappointment will be loud, the other will be intimate. This is where the pressure intensifies. My father called again this afternoon. He did not argue. He simply said, "Think carefully. Some decisions cannot be undone." He was not talking about business. He was talking about legacy, about family alignment, about generational continuity. And when words like that are used, they carry history. They carry expectation. They carry loyalty. And loyalty is not easily dismissed. But when I think about loyalty, I have to ask myself something more honest. Is loyalty about preserving comfort, or about honoring truth? If I choose you against their wishes, am I betraying them? Or am I simply choosing the woman who aligns with who I am becoming? And if I choose them over you, am I protecting tradition, or am I surrendering authenticity? The tension inside me is no longer quiet, it is active. I can feel it shaping my tone, my posture, my sleep. You may not see all of it yet, but you will. Because unresolved conflict does not stay hidden forever. And I am afraid of one thing more than their disapproval. I am afraid of becoming emotionally divided. Of loving you while subconsciously resenting the cost. There is something else that happened tonight that shifted everything again. Something that made this choice feel less theoretical and more immediate. And when you hear it, you may understand why the stakes now feel dangerously close to irreversible. Tonight it stopped being abstract. My family invited me to dinner again. Just me. No explanation. No agenda stated. I knew what it was before I arrived. The atmosphere was almost too calm. My mother was attentive. My father was measured. My sister unusually warm. It felt orchestrated. And then, halfway through the meal, my father said it plainly. If you continue with her, we will support you publicly. But privately, we will step back. He said it without anger, without threat. Just a boundary. Step back. That phrase has been echoing in my mind ever since. They would not disown me. They would not create scandal. They would not argue anymore. They would simply withdraw emotionally. Fewer calls, less closeness, subtle distance, a quiet reshaping of connection. And I realized in that moment that the cost of choosing you would not be explosive. It would be silent. Do you understand how heavy that is? I can handle confrontation. I can handle criticism. But emotional distance from the people who raised me, that is a slow ache. And they know that. They know I value connection. They know I value harmony. So instead of fighting, they offered absence. And for a moment I felt myself leaning toward compromise. Not leaving you, but softening us, slowing us down, making you less central, creating emotional space so that the transition would not feel so abrupt to them. I told myself that might protect everyone. But who would it really protect? It would protect me from feeling their withdrawal. It would protect them from feeling replaced. And it would quietly ask you to accept being partially chosen. You would never say it out loud, but you would feel it. You would feel when I hesitate to hold your hand in front of them. You would feel when I defend you gently instead of firmly. You would feel when I avoid certain conversations to keep peace. Tell me honestly, could you live inside that kind of half-light? Could you love a man who stands beside you confidently in private, but cautiously in public? Because that is the version of me they are hoping for. A man who keeps his romantic life compartmentalized. A man who does not let love redefine his center. And here is the truth that is almost unbearable to admit. For a brief second tonight, when they described that quiet distance, I imagined it. I imagined life with you, but slightly muted, less visible, less integrated. A private world separate from my family world, and it seemed manageable. Manageable. But love should not be managed like risk. Love should not be diluted to preserve comfort. When I left that dinner, I did not feel angry. I felt split, because their proposal was not unreasonable. It was calm, rational, almost respectful, and yet it required me to redefine you as something secondary. You are not secondary, but am I strong enough to refuse them completely? There is something I have not told you yet. Something you did that night after the first dinner that changed the way I see this entire conflict. And I did not understand its significance until now. And when I tell you, you may realize that this is no longer just about whether my family accepts you. It is about whether I deserve you. That night, after the first dinner, when I dropped you off and you stepped out of the car, you paused before closing the door. You looked at me with that steady calm I have come to recognize, and you said, "You don't have to defend me to them. Just be honest with yourself." Then you smiled gently and walked inside. At the time, I thought you were being gracious, strong, self-contained. Now I realize you were doing something far more profound. You were refusing to compete. You were not asking me to fight for you loudly. You were not demanding immediate allegiance. You were not trying to secure your position by pushing me into a corner. You trusted that if I chose you, it would be because I truly wanted to, not because I felt pressured. That kind of restraint is rare, and it unsettled me more than any argument could have. Because when someone does not demand loyalty, it forces you to confront whether you are capable of offering it freely. Tonight, sitting alone after that second dinner, I replayed your words, "Be honest with yourself." And I realized something uncomfortable. I have been analyzing this situation as if it is a negotiation between two sides. But it is not. It is a test of alignment. The version of me that seeks approval is tired. He has spent decades meeting expectations, surpassing standards, proving worth. The version of me that loves you feels different. Less performative, more grounded. With you, I am not striving to impress. I am choosing to connect. And here is the part that shifts everything. When my family offered emotional distance as the price of loving you, I did not immediately feel fear. I felt sadness. And beneath that sadness was clarity. Because if connection with them depends on suppressing something authentic in me, then that connection is conditional. You have never loved me conditionally. You challenge me, you question me, you require presence. But you do not require me to be smaller than I am becoming. Let me ask you something that matters deeply. If I stand fully beside you, knowing it may cool the warmth of my family for a time, will you remain steady when that grief surfaces in me? Because I will grieve. I will miss ease. I will miss uncomplicated gatherings. Choosing you does not erase that loss. It simply prioritizes something deeper. The truth is becoming clearer, but clarity does not eliminate consequence. It sharpens it. There is still one fear lingering in me, a final hesitation I have not voiced. What if, years from now, when tension has settled but scars remain, you look at me and say, was it worth it? And what if I see doubt in your eyes? I can handle my family's disappointment. I do not know if I can handle yours. But something happened tonight that shifted the scale permanently. I imagined you leaving. Not because I chose them, but because you sensed my wavering and decided you deserved certainty. And the thought of losing you did not feel like stability. It felt like collapse. When I imagined you leaving, it was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no accusation. Just a quiet conversation where you look at me with that composed strength and say, I need a man who stands without trembling. You would not insult me. You would not beg. You would simply choose yourself. And the terrifying part is that I would understand. I would see the logic. I would respect the dignity. And that respect would not make it hurt less. I tried to test the feeling. I asked myself whether I could recover if you walked away, because I hesitated too long. I have rebuilt companies from the ground up. I have recovered from public humiliation. I have endured isolation. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that does not heal through productivity. It felt like losing alignment, not just losing affection. So I asked myself a harder question. If you left, would I blame my family? Or would I blame myself? And the answer came quickly. I would blame myself. Because they did not forbid me. They did not threaten me. They simply revealed their preference. The decision remains mine, which means the consequence is mine too. There is a turning point happening inside me that I can no longer ignore. I am beginning to see that hesitation is also a choice. Delaying clarity is a form of decision. And every day I allow this tension to linger, I am asking you to live in uncertainty. That is not fair to you. You deserve steadiness. You deserve a man who does not consult a committee about his heart. But here is where the conflict sharpens again. Choosing you openly will not just disappoint them temporarily. It may alter the emotional architecture of my family permanently. Some fractures do not fully heal. They reshape. And I must be prepared to live inside that reshaping without resentment. Because if I ever look at you and unconsciously associate you with distance from them, that would poison us slowly. Tell me something honestly. If I choose you fully and the relationship with my family cools for years, will you carry guilt? Or will you stand firm, knowing that love sometimes requires redefinition? I need to know whether you can handle not being universally accepted without internalizing it. Because this will test both of us, not just me. The near loss is no longer hypothetical. I feel it pressing against my chest. Not losing them, losing you. Because every time I hesitate, I risk teaching you that you are negotiable. And you are not negotiable. Not to me. But my behavior must reflect that, not just my words. I realized something else tonight. When my father said some decisions cannot be undone, he meant it as caution. But he was right in a way he did not intend. If I let you go out of fear, that decision will not be undone either. I will not find another you. I may find comfort. I may find approval. But I will not find this specific combination of strength and tenderness that you bring into my life. There is one final layer I have not revealed yet. A truth about myself that explains why this choice feels so destabilizing. And until I say it, you will not fully understand why my hesitation has lasted this long. The truth I have been avoiding is not about my family. It is not about you. It is about the way I was trained to survive. I was raised to equate love with stability, predictability, alignment. In my world growing up, harmony meant safety. If everyone approved, things were secure. If there was tension, something was wrong. That wiring does not disappear just because I became successful. It lives quietly in my nervous system. So when my family disapproves of you, it does not just feel like disagreement. It feels like instability. And instability is something I have spent my entire life trying to eliminate. You, however, do not eliminate instability. You invite transformation. That is different. Transformation is uncomfortable before it is beautiful. It requires friction. It requires letting old structures crack. And I realize now that what I have been calling hesitation is actually resistance to transformation. Because loving you fully would mean stepping out of the role I have mastered. The agreeable son. The predictable pillar. The one who makes strategic decisions that protect the whole system. Choosing you means I become something else. A man who prioritizes internal alignment over external approval. That shift feels seismic. I need you to understand something deeply personal. When I succeed publicly, my family celebrates. When I disrupt expectations privately, they grow cautious. Their approval has always reinforced my identity. So when they question you, it unconsciously feels like they are questioning my judgment. And that strikes at a very old part of me that still wants to be seen as wise, not impulsive. So I overanalyze, I dissect. I imagine alternate futures. I create contingency plans. I call old acquaintances to test emotional contrast. I explore every exit route before committing to a path. That is how I operate in business. But love is not a merger. It is not a risk portfolio. It is not something you hedge. And yet I have been trying to hedge you. That realization humbles me. When you stood calmly after that dinner and refused to demand loyalty, you unknowingly forced me into a mirror. You showed me that strength does not shout. It stands. And now I see clearly that my conflict has never been about whether you are right for me. It has been about whether I am ready to withstand the emotional restructuring that comes with choosing you. Because here is the truth I can no longer hide. If I choose you fully, my relationship with my family will change. Not collapse. Not explode. Change, and I will grieve the version of closeness that once existed. I will miss the uncomplicated rhythm. I will feel the subtle distance. There will be moments when I question whether I could have avoided that pain. But if I choose safety over you, I will grieve something far worse. I will grieve the man I might have become. I will grieve the partnership that had depth instead of convenience. I will grieve waking up beside someone who is accepted, but not aligned. That grief would not be loud, it would be quiet. It would surface in small ways, in restless nights, in subtle irritations, in unspoken comparisons, and over time it would harden into regret. Tell me something that matters. If I stand in front of them and say, calmly and clearly, that you are my choice, will you stand steady when their warmth cools? Will you allow me to process the loss without interpreting it as doubt about you? Because there will be moments when I am quieter. Not because I regret you, but because I am recalibrating. I need to know that you can hold space for that recalibration without withdrawing, and I need to admit something else that is difficult. There was a moment, just once, where I almost convinced myself that love should not require this level of tension. I almost told myself that if something is right, it flows easily everywhere. That resistance is a sign, but that belief is simplistic. Real alignment sometimes disrupts existing systems. Growth often triggers resistance before acceptance. The near loss I felt imagining you walking away clarified something fundamental. When I pictured my family stepping back, I felt sadness. When I pictured you stepping away, I felt panic. That difference is not trivial. It reveals hierarchy. You are not an accessory to my life. You are central to the version of my future that feels honest. And honesty has become more important to me than harmony. Still, there is a final fear lingering in me, and I will not pretend it is gone. What if I choose you fully, and years later the strain between my family and us never fully heals? What if holidays remain slightly tense? What if certain conversations always carry an undertone? Can you live inside that long-term complexity without resenting me for it? Because this will not be a fairy tale resolution, it will be a mature one, gradual, layered, earned over time. I am ready to choose you. But I need to know you are ready to choose a man whose life comes with depth, history, and friction. The decision is crystallizing in me now. Not impulsively, not rebelliously, but deliberately, and once I speak it aloud to them, there will be no retreat. I did not sleep the night after I admitted that to myself. Not because I was confused anymore, but because clarity carries its own weight. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. And the truth was no longer abstract, it was painfully simple. I love you. Not in a dramatic, impulsive way. Not in a way that seeks rebellion or validation. I love you in the quiet, irreversible way that reshapes a man from the inside. But clarity does not eliminate consequence. It sharpens it. The next morning, I called my father. I did not rehearse this time. I did not prepare strategic language. I simply told him I needed to speak openly. My voice was calm, but my chest felt tight. I said, "I have thought carefully. I am choosing her." There was silence on the other end. Not anger. Not shouting. Just a long silence that felt heavier than any argument. He asked one question. "Are you prepared for what that means?" And for the first time, I did not answer defensively. I said, "I am prepared to grow." Because that is what this is. Growth. He did not try to persuade me further. He did not threaten distance. He simply said he hoped I understood the weight of my decision. And when the call ended, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not regret, a strange steadiness. The kind that comes when a man stops negotiating with himself. But the real test was not that call. It was the conversation with my mother. She did not hide her disappointment. She did not disguise it as concern. She said she felt like she was losing a version of me she understood. And that sentence pierced something old in me, because I do not want to be a stranger to her. I do not want to fracture history. But I also cannot remain unchanged to preserve comfort. I told her something I had never said before. I said, "You are not losing me. You are meeting a version of me who is choosing deliberately." She did not respond immediately. I could hear emotion in her breathing. And I realized something profound in that moment. Her resistance is rooted in fear, not hatred of you. Fear of change, fear of displacement, fear of being less central in my life. That realization softened me. But softness does not mean reversal. When I hung up, I sat alone and asked myself one final brutal question. If my family's warmth cools for a season, can I live without resentment? Because resentment would destroy us slowly. And the answer came quietly but clearly. Yes. I can live with their disappointment. I cannot live with my own regret. The near loss that almost broke me was never about them stepping back. It was about you stepping away because I lacked courage. And I will not let that be our story. Still, I need you to understand something with maturity. This choice will not magically fix everything. There will be awkward gatherings. There will be restrained conversations. There will be moments when you sense tension in the air. And I may feel torn occasionally, not because I doubt you, but because history is not erased overnight. When those moments happen, will you lean toward me instead of away? Will you remind yourself that I chose you with clarity, not impulse? Because partnership at this stage of life is not about perfection. It is about endurance. I also need to confess something vulnerable. There is a part of me that worries you will see my family's resistance as a reflection of your worth. I do not want you internalizing their fear as your flaw. Their discomfort is about change, not about your character. You are not too strong. You are not too independent. You are not too much. You are simply not familiar to them yet. And familiarity takes time. The hidden fear I have carried is that loving you would fracture my identity. But I see now that it refines it. I am not becoming weaker. I am becoming more honest, more aligned, more willing to risk comfort for authenticity. Tell me something deeply personal. When you imagine standing beside me at a table where approval is cautious instead of enthusiastic, do you feel empowered or exhausted? Because your answer matters. I can withstand external tension. But I do not want you silently draining yourself to maintain composure. This is not about winning against my family. It is about building something resilient enough to outlast their initial resistance. And here is the turning point that surprised me most. When I finally stopped imagining alternatives, stopped calling the past, stopped rehearsing retreat, and allowed myself to feel the full weight of choosing you, I felt peace. Not relief from pressure, peace from alignment. The noise quieted. The calculations stopped. The internal debate dissolved. That peace is not fragile, it is earned. But there is one final step that remains. I have chosen you internally. I have spoken to them. I have confronted my fear. Now I must speak to you without hesitation. Not in partial sentences. Not in cautious language. I need to look at you and say it clearly. And when I do, there will be no space left for doubt. When I say I need to speak to you clearly, I mean without strategy, without self-protection, without leaving a door slightly open in case I need to retreat. I have lived most of my life with contingency plans, backup systems, alternate routes. That mindset built success, but it quietly followed me into love. I kept an emotional exit unlocked. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I feared being trapped in a decision that carried irreversible consequence. Loving you requires me to lock that door. I have been asking myself what commitment truly means at this stage of life. It is not infatuation. It is not chemistry. It is not even compatibility alone. It is willingness to endure complexity together. It is choosing alignment over approval. It is accepting that not everyone will understand the bond you feel in your bones. And here is the truth I have delayed saying plainly. When I imagine building the next decade of my life, you are in it in a way that no one else is. Not as an accessory. Not as an admired partner. As a collaborator in growth. As the woman who will challenge my blind spots. As the one who will not let me hide behind achievement when I am emotionally tired. You see beyond performance. You see the human structure beneath it. And that visibility is not comfortable, but it is sacred. I need to confess something else that has been sitting quietly inside me. Part of my hesitation was pride. I did not want to admit that my family's disapproval affected me. I wanted to appear immune, decisive, above influence. But influence is human. The desire for parental approval does not evaporate with age. It lingers quietly, and confronting that vulnerability has humbled me more than their criticism ever could. When I spoke to them, when I stated calmly that you are my choice, something inside me shifted permanently. I was no longer negotiating identity. I was declaring it. That declaration did not feel rebellious. It felt mature. It felt like a man stepping into authorship of his own life. But authorship comes with responsibility. I must protect you not only from external judgment, but from internal ambiguity. I cannot love you privately and hesitate publicly. I cannot reassure you in silence and appear uncertain in front of them. That duality would erode us slowly. Let me ask you something that matters deeply. If my mother's tone remains cool for a while, will you interpret it as rejection, or as adjustment? If my father maintains distance initially, will you see it as hostility, or as processing? Because how you frame their response will shape how we experience it together. I am not naive. I know there will be days when the weight resurfaces, when I feel a pang of sadness for the simplicity that once existed. But sadness does not equal regret. Grief does not equal mistake. Sometimes growth carries both joy and mourning simultaneously. The moment I realized I could live with their disappointment, but not with losing you, everything clarified. That clarity did not eliminate complexity. It redefined priority. You are the priority, not because you demanded it. Because alignment demanded it. I have imagined standing beside you at a gathering where the energy is restrained. I have imagined subtle glances, measured conversation. And, instead of panic, I now feel resolve. Because I will not allow you to stand alone in those rooms. I will not let you question whether you are fully chosen. But I also need your strength, not defensive strength, not combative strength. Quiet strength, the kind that does not seek validation, the kind that trusts time to soften edges. Tell me something honestly. Are you ready for love that is not universally applauded, but deeply authentic? Are you ready to build something that may take time to be understood? Because this is not a dramatic war between us and them. It is a gradual recalibration of roles, expectations, and identity. And I am ready. I am ready to choose without apology. I am ready to withstand temporary discomfort for long-term truth. I am ready to look at my family and say, calmly, that I trust my heart not because it is impulsive, but because it is deliberate. Most importantly, I am ready to look at you and remove the last trace of hesitation from my voice. You once told me you did not need to be defended loudly. You only needed me to be honest with myself. I have done that now, and honesty leads me to you. There is only one final thing left to say. Not to them, to you. It is not dramatic. It is not theatrical. It is simple and absolute. I am going to say this without theatrics, without raising my voice, without trying to make it sound larger than it needs to be. I choose you, not because it is easy, not because it is approved, not because it proves anything to anyone. I choose you because when I strip away expectation, legacy, pride, fear, and comfort, you are the one constant that feels aligned with who I am becoming. For weeks I have wrestled with tension as if it were a warning sign. I treated resistance like a red flag. But resistance is not always a signal to retreat. Sometimes it is a signal that you are crossing into growth, and growth rarely arrives with applause. When my family reacted the way they did, it shook something old inside me. It triggered the part of me that still wants harmony at any cost, the part that equates approval with safety. I almost mistook that discomfort for incompatibility. I almost confused fear with intuition. But fear feels constricting. Loving you feels expansive, even in conflict, especially in conflict. When I imagined letting you go to restore peace, I did not feel relief. I felt contraction. I felt smaller. Like I was preserving comfort but sacrificing evolution. And that is not a trade I am willing to make anymore. You have never asked me to abandon my family. You have never demanded ultimatums. You have never positioned yourself against them. That restraint told me everything I needed to know about your character. You are not trying to win territory. You are offering partnership. And partnership at this stage of life is not about romance alone. It is about choosing who walks beside you when the structure shifts, who sits with you when history rearranges itself, who holds steady when approval fluctuates. There will be awkward dinners. There will be restrained smiles. There will be pauses in conversation that feel heavier than usual. I will feel the cooling of warmth at times. I will grieve the ease that once existed. But I will not grieve you. Because losing you would not feel like adjustment. It would feel like erasure. I have asked myself every possible question. Am I rebelling? No. Am I blinded? No. Am I confusing intensity with depth? No. I have examined this from every angle. I have tested my motives. I have confronted my ego. I have confronted my fear. And the answer has remained steady. You are not a risk to my future. You are the future I want. If my family needs time, I will give them time. If they need space, I will allow space. But I will not dilute my choice to make it easier for anyone else to digest. And I need you to hear this clearly. You are not secondary. You are not negotiable. You are not an experiment. You are the woman I am willing to grow with publicly and privately. There may be days when I am quiet while processing tension. There may be moments when I look reflective. But that reflection will not be doubt about you. It will be integration. Realigning pieces of my history with the direction I am choosing. I will not ask you to shrink to fit comfort. I will not ask you to soften your strength so others feel secure. I will not love you halfway to preserve approval. What I am offering is not drama. It is commitment with awareness of cost. And I need to ask you one final question, not to test you, but to honor your agency. Are you ready to stand beside a man who has chosen you with full consciousness of consequence? Are you ready to build something that may not be universally celebrated at first, but deeply rooted in authenticity? Because I am done hesitating. I am done negotiating with fear. I am done imagining alternate futures that feel hollow. I am stepping into this fully. And if there is distance from my family for a season, we will navigate it with patience. If there is tension in certain rooms, we will face it together. If there are moments of sadness, we will process them instead of letting them poison us. Love at this stage of life is not about fantasy. It is about courage with maturity. You once asked me quietly, without pressure, to be honest with myself. I have been. And honesty leads me here.